Eric, you have written a book. It's called Don't Retire, Graduate, Building a Path to Financial Freedom at Any Age. So, you know how books are structured. So, I'd love for you to describe your path, your journey through the financial industry as if it were a book. And if
Ah,
so, what would be the title of the book? And what would be some of the main chapters? And ideally, is there a plot twist in there?
it's funny because the title is already taken. It would be Forrest Gump. And the reason for that is that so much of my life has been a fortuitous accident, including getting into this business. Like most great financial advisors, I was an English major. That's a natural transition into finance. Studied English, was planning on law school, took a job at a brokerage firm and in the legal department, and was on my way and fell in love with the financial business. And that was now 32 years ago. And I wound up going through some of the iterations early in the career. I spent some time at a life insurance company. I started building a practice and getting all the alphabet soup after my name because I had no background in finance or accounting or any of those disciplines. And once I earned the CFP in 1998, I wanted to do financial planning. You cannot do that. You certainly couldn't then at an insurance company. It's still not easy, but it was impossible then. And so I found a more senior CFP who was looking to start a firm and needed some sweat equity. And I got a chance to be part of a startup in the late 90s, pretty well just in time for the tech bubble to burst. We spent 4 years together. I learned an enormous amount from him. He was a wonderful mentor. And in 2003, I launched what is now BFG Financial Advisors with one full-time and one part-time person. And so now we're 10 CFPs, 22 employees, clients in 37 states. And I've been at this now for 30 plus years. And I think if there's a plot twist, it's that all the things that I was super excited to do are now the things that other people in the firm are really excited to do. And so I'm beginning my succession plan now and transitioning into a role that probably I was born to play, which is a growth officer, and spending time growing the organization instead of doing direct client advising, because we have a huge team of people who do an incredible job with that.
And was there a pivotal moment there, let's say from 2003, when you started BFG Advisors? What was, or was there a big turning point that sort of changed the trajectory of the firm?
I think the turning point was taking on and selling some equity in my late 30s to then a junior partner and realizing that I did not want to do this alone, despite being the entrepreneur and the face of the firm. I really wanted to build a team. And so the combination of having started selling shares at a very young age, and people thought I was nuts, and then growing a team both organically and inorganically. So we've grown, our organic client development has been strong over the years, but we've also added two other M&A activities to our growth. One being bringing somebody on who was 5 years from retirement, who was able to come and transition her clientele to us, and then we bought her out. And one who came in and has a long runway ahead with the company and is my successor. I think if there was a big moment, it was when I realized I didn't want to do this by myself.
And you mentioned that you're already looking at your succession plan there. You did
Oh,
an
yeah.
M&A deal, and that person is going to be the successor.
Hmm.
And are you still managing clients today, or have you completely exited out of being a lead advisor?
Very few. And I'm on my way to exiting entirely over the next 36 months or so. It's going to be a gradual transition because some of these people I've worked with for their entire adult lives and certainly mine. And it is a challenging thing, even though we have wonderful people, the relationships are challenging to sever. And so what I want to do is I want to make sure that number one, they're in good shape. And number two, that every one of the clients we represent knows that I'm still here for big life-changing events, for philanthropy, for estate planning, if there's a loss of a loved one, some of the big things that really are still I'm passionate about. I want to be more of a utility infielder, a pinch hitter, Steve. I want to be the one who gets brought in to assist when there are moments of either opportunity or tragedy, as opposed to doing sort of the routine physical exams financially. And that way I can stay very much involved as an advisor, but not be on that treadmill that 30 years in any industry can create.
I spent a lot of time over the years working with advisors on that very topic of how do you transition clients and relationships that you've had for 20, 30 years over to another advisor at the firm. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that in terms of the actual conversation that you
Mhm.
have with the client? How do you communicate that? How far in advance do you
Mhm.
prepare for that transition? How do you decide which of the advisors in your firm might be the most appropriate advisor to work with this client? I'd love to hear any details that you can share there.
I can share that. That's about a seven-part question, so I'm going to approach that in various chunks. First, in a perfect world, a transition of a client relationship is a 2-year process, and the reason that I consider it a 2-year process is it's important for the incoming advisor or advisors to be in meetings with these clients along the way. It can't be total strangers when they finally sit down together. And so for year one of that transition, we do an annual strategy meeting and we do an annual tactical meeting with clients every year. So there would be 2 sessions that I would lead and they would be in the room and participating and getting to know and starting to build a relationship. In year two, we would both be in the room, but they'd be running the meeting and I would be the so-called arm candy and just there to help take notes and assist and maybe provide perspective. And in a perfect world, come year three, I don't need to be in the room anymore. And we've had a fair degree of success with this over the last couple of years. I would say early in my career, when there were opportunities to transition clients to younger advisors, I would say we made almost every mistake you can make. This was not perfect. And it does come down to communication, it comes down to expectations. I think it's really important. Clients generally want advisors younger than them. They really do. In the same way that I wouldn't want my father's doctor, I wouldn't want my father's accountant, any of those folks, because I want them to be available when I need them the most. And so to have an advisor who is experienced, capable, competent, diligent, and ethical, but also 10 or 20 plus years younger, means that when it's your moment to retire, or when there's a health issue, or when there's some kind of major event in your life, there is someone who hasn't retired, who is still very much there with boots on the ground. And I think that's part of the messaging, is to make sure that we're here. The other part of the messaging, Steve, is that we are a true ensemble. None of us manage our own clients. All of us are salary based. So every client is a client of the firm's anyway. So we have about 700 families, most of which are multi-generational, and all of our advisors plug and play. So if there's a situation where we have educational diversity, there's a situation where we have somebody who's a business owner who's going to go through a transaction, we have one of our principals who does a great job with that specific issue. If there's something around education planning, or there's something around a tax matter, or there's something around a divorce, we have people who have really built some niches within the market, and we can pull them in and say, here's somebody who really knows how to value that closely held business, or here's somebody who really understands what happens when a household splits, or I'm the person that gets called generally when a client or one of their loved ones dies. Not because that's a fun thing to talk about, but because that's my background with the life insurance and the estate planning and the legal side. I go to estate planning conferences. I'm one of the only financial advisors there. That's really that wealth transfer and wealth preservation and philanthropy. That's really where I can provide the most value. And I can do that with any client if I'm not still on that treadmill. We want to be agnostic. If a prospective client contacts the office, I want advisor A to take the call, have a conversation, say, you know what, you really need to meet advisor B. So that there's no there's no sort of desire to outproduce somebody. There's no compensation based on how much you're selling to someone. None of that exists here. What's good for the firm matters. And our younger advisors have paths to equity. So we have 7 different equity owners. And as a result of that, as we grow and as we take folks on that bus, they benefit from the success of the firm, not from the success of their clients or their practice.
Yeah, getting back to the client transition for just a
Yeah.
second here.
Yeah.
Over the course of those 2 years, is there a specific point in there typically where you clearly say to the client, I, Eric, am going to be stepping into a different role here, and Mary is going to be your quote lead advisor going forward? Is there a point when you have that type of conversation?
Yeah, it happens early in that process, saying that the reason that Mary in your example is here is because I want to make sure that you all know each other, because ultimately this is a role that she's transitioning into, and my role within the firm is changing. And there can be trepidation around that. And every now and again, we get some pushback. But generally speaking, I think people understand this is a natural progression in a firm of our size and with our depth. And I believe very strongly in communicating that, but we don't always know way in advance. I don't know exactly today what's going to happen a year or two from now. I know what I think is coming, but I like to reserve the right to be wrong because I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I know what we're trying to accomplish, but we may wind up, for example, a year from now, may wind up onboarding another advisor who's got a $100 million book of business, and we have to suddenly all take on some new roles, and I might get involved in a different way because of that transition. So I don't know what's going to happen. I know that we're trying to be flexible, we're trying to communicate, and our clients, there's an enormous amount of depth. So I typically don't answer my own emails. I have a my right hand who goes through the emails, forwards them to the appropriate people, and every one of the clients who I work with has someone listed in our CRM as future lead advisor. They're the ones answering the emails, returning the phone calls, and so forth for the routine stuff. So by the time clients meet them and have sat with them, they've had communication with them before. They're not a stranger. They understand that there's diligence, that they're going to get back to them. And quite frankly, as much as I travel, I'm hard to get. Like, I'm not that easy to book with right now. And so a client who has a question who needs it answered is much more likely to get it answered the same day by someone other than me than if I had to wait until I got to that queue. It's just not, it's almost impossible.
For those of you listening that might be in this process, or you're going to be entering this process at some point of trying to transition your clients over to another advisor at the firm, I actually did a podcast on that with my coaching colleague, Amy Koenig, and we went into great detail on the specific steps that I recommend and the way that I work with my advisor clients on that. And I've got it all written out too. So it's something that you can download for free. So feel free to go to stevesandusky.com and look up the episode with myself and Amy on transitioning clients, and you can download sort of the step-by-step process that I recommend. So Eric, I appreciate you sharing some of your thoughts there.
Yeah, I wish I had known there was a process on paper. You could have saved me a lot of time.
That's right.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, thank you. So you started talking about how your advisors are structured, how they're
Mm-hmm.
compensated. You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that they're on salary. I'd love
Yes.
to go a little deeper with that in
Sure.
terms of maybe how you think about career paths as
Mm-hmm.
well. And is it just salary, or is there a salary plus bonus? How do
Mm-hmm.
you think about advisor capacity? You mentioned you function as an ensemble. So I'd love to hear how you think about that. So I know I keep throwing a bunch of different questions at you,
Yeah.
so I'm giving you some hooks here, and you can pick which ones you want to go after.
Want to get to all of them, but I got to remember one at a time. You asked about advisor capacity. So let's start with that. We For our advisors, every one of our advisors, every one of our clients, I should say, has at least two advisors within the firm. Usually someone more senior and someone more junior, because of travel and because of the complexity of relationships and because of the availability to get somebody. Now, we have something internally. We have two different kinds of clients. We have private wealth clients who we meet with twice a year, and we have financial planning clients who we meet with one time a year. So naturally, we can't use capacity as just a household count because there's twice as many routine meetings for some clients as there are for others. So we use something that we refer to as the private wealth equivalent, which is really the 2-to-1 ratio, so that we're trying to determine how many strategy meetings or tactical meetings should be held, should be on each advisor's calendar for client retention and for client service, and when they need an associate assigned to them. So for us, the number is 75. At 75 households, you either have 75 for two a year or 150 for one a year, or some combination. That's when you get a second chair associate assigned to you who's going to start answering some of your emails and being in the meetings and handling some of the phone calls and doing a lot of the wrap up from meetings. And then when you get to a point that's twice, that's when you've hit your capacity. So our capacity is 150 relationships basically that are twice a year. At that moment, you can't take on new clients. And we actually don't want people to get to that capacity. That's the moment where the associate, before they get there, the associate has to start receiving some of those opportunities to be what we refer to as a hybrid. We have some people who are associate advisors who are second chair for meetings, doing the prep, doing the wrap up. They're in the meetings, they're answering emails and calls, but they're not rendering the advice directly. And then we have the lead advisors who, of course, are responsible for not just the relationship management, but for the advice. Once you've gotten to a point where you're prepared to start being first chair, it doesn't happen overnight. You don't go from 0 to 100 households overnight. That's not reality. So we actually have a position that we refer to as a hybrid advisor who has some client relationships where they're still second chair, some client relationships where they're first chair. And the idea is that all those second chair relationships should transition over a 2-year period or so to be first chair so that no one ever caps out their capacity, because that's not a good sign. If you hit capacity for your senior most people, it means they don't have time for business development. They can't do as great a job as they want to, and they're going to be stressed. And so we try to make sure that at 75, you have some help. And well before you get to 150, you're doing some transitioning yourself. So that's the
So
capacity.
yeah, and then in terms of the career path, it sounds
Mhm.
like there's a pretty clear path there for folks from second chair to first chair to getting support and that sort of thing. So any additional detail on that?
Yeah, we have two defined career paths here at the firm, one of which is designed to be moving someone toward the advisory role, and one which is not, which is more of an operations or behind the scenes role, because they're both important and we want them to both be treated with not only respect and reverence, but with the opportunity to grow their careers. So almost everyone who's hired, if they're hired and they're green, they don't already have clients, they're hired as CSAs, they're client service associates. They're assisting behind the scenes. They're spending their first year or two getting licensed and learning the business and handling some of the investment operations, the insurance operations, some of the planning and prep. And then after that happens, they can choose whether they want to move toward being more of a senior CSA or someone who eventually is going to be involved in some of our committee work, investment committee, marketing committee, finance committee, different groups of people who have other roles beyond just the CSA piece, or if they want to then move to being an associate. And really, it comes down to the career path is written out, but it comes down to need. At what moment is there a need? Do we need that next associate to step into that role, or do we need the next senior CSA to be doing much more high end meeting planning, meeting prep? Somebody who doesn't want to be a client-facing financial advisor can still be a CFP if they choose. They can still do a lot of the behind the scenes, the plans, the power planning type work, the investment recommendations. The only thing they're not doing is sitting down with the client and managing the one-on-one relationship. There are two defined career paths for people based on what they want to do, and one is not more important than the other.
And in terms of the comp structure, again, you mentioned that a base salary, but is there also a bonus in there? And if so, what's that based on?
The base salary is based entirely on the investment news compensation study that comes out every year. We use that compensation study and we make sure that everybody's at top quartile. That way we know we're not losing anybody over money. That means compensation's fair. And it means it's at the higher end of the spectrum without being, and it's very objective. In terms of the bonus structure here, we have a few different ones that are available. One is a marketing activity bonus for folks who essentially do business development and land new clients. That there's always incentive around that because that helps grow the firm. There's also a team-wide profit sharing bonus. If we are more profitable than 25% come the end of the year, we share the excess profits with our non-shareholders because the shareholders are already getting a bite of that apple in terms of dividends. And then periodically, we will throw in other incentives for things like recruiting an employee or other types of things like that. But we have not done incentives around personal production per se because no one has their own book. I need employee or advisor A to be perfectly comfortable saying, this person's getting married and I think they ought to work with you now for whatever reason.
And you mentioned that you're sort of evolving into a growth officer role.
Yes, yes.
And some firms expect that every advisor does both in terms of they do business development and then they also are the advisor. Other firms really split those roles where they're large enough where they can have a full-time dedicated business development team, and then they have full-time advisors who do nothing but just serve clients. So
Mhm.
where do you guys fall on that spectrum?
I think we're somewhere in between. Right now, I would say that the vast majority of the new business development still begins somehow with me. And that's not something we want to perpetuate. So, our theme for the year is organic growth. And my desire is to spend some time with the 3 or 4 advisors within our team who really have a desire, an aptitude, and an ability, in our opinion, in their opinion, to learn how to do business development. So, I'm going to be teaching people how to fish instead of catching fish for them. But not everyone is really made for that. Some people are incredible technicians, but they're not necessarily going to go work a Chamber of Commerce event. Other people have that gift. And if we can have people play to their strengths without overburdening the folks who really would hate that, I don't want to lose great advisors because their compensation requires them to do a certain amount of business development. If you're handling client relationships and you're doing a great job, you're going to get referrals anyway. So even our people who aren't active, regular business developers, who aren't wild extroverts, are doing some biz dev just by virtue of getting to their clients, to their kids or family members or neighbors or coworkers or any of those other things. And so I think everyone's playing a role, but for some, it's going to be a bigger piece of their job. I can't be the only one because first of all, I could kiss the bus tomorrow. Second of all, I want to do this for a long time, but not forever. We need to make sure there's other people here who know how to do it.
And for those handful of advisors that you're going to work with to help them become effective in business development, do you envision some type of bonus program for them for bringing the business in, or how might you envision their structure changing?
That already exists. That's the marketing activity bonus. So there's already an incentive to land new clients and to bring them into the fold. So I suspect they'll be doing more of it than if they weren't focusing on that. So I think it'll work out financially for them too. But I don't want to put people in a position where they're miserable doing what they do because that's so uncomfortable for them. And some people just aren't comfortable doing that.
So walk me through some of the marketing that you're doing today. So I know you're pretty active on the media side. So
Yeah.
tell me the story about how that developed and where you're at today with that.
So I have written 3 books and a workbook. So there's material out there. We also do a lot of white papers or ebooks that we put out as opportunities to not only grow our influence and grow our list, if you will, but also to do some education for folks. So that's part of the mass media type piece. And of course, we have social media and some other things, though we're not advertising per se on that, but we do have a presence. I think the things that we're doing that are a little different, I am focused really on 4 aspects of business development, which I don't want to confuse with marketing, but it is certainly part of that. One of them is working with centers of influence. And we went through our CRM and we found that there were 600 centers of influence in our system. There's no way under the sky we have relationships with 600 centers. It is impossible. So we've been going through, Amanda and I have been going through this list and cultivating it and basically figuring out, first of all, where is there stuff in there that doesn't belong? And then I'm reaching out to the attorneys and accountants and other advisors who work with mutual clients to introduce myself in my current role and spending some time with people. And we're trying to figure out who are those active relationships likely to be, because at the end of the day, I'd like to have between 25 and 50, not 600. So that's centers of influence. And I'm also using that as a way to help our young people fish. Because if I know there's a senior partner at a estate planning firm who does great work, but is my age or older, they probably have a young associate who also needs to learn how to do this for their firm. And I can sit down and be a kind of a matchmaker and say, I can bring one of the folks from our office to meet him or her. And next thing, they're starting to build a relationship that from there, I don't even have to be involved. They can get together for coffee once or twice a year and talk about business or join networking groups or find other ways to work together. So that's the center of influence piece. Second piece is we have a lot of strategic alliances with other financial advisors. And that sounds strange to a lot of people. A lot of people do a double take, but you can't be good at everything. And so for us, we've got a relationship with a firm in Pittsburgh that we really love working with, and they have a minimum asset requirement, and we don't. We're happy to work with folks with no assets or with assets that are not under our management for a monthly subscription, essentially. And so they will refer opportunities to us. We take great care of them and everybody wins, and there's a revenue share. Same thing, we have a firm in Manhattan where they do a great job with asset management, but they do no insurance work. And we have an insurance department. So rather than have them worry that either it's not getting done or it's being done by someone who's going to try and poach their relationship, we work together, we share compensation, we do the meetings together. They're on the same side of the table as their client when they're having that discussion as the advocate. And we can help solve some problems for that client without stepping on their toes. We're building a relationship right now with a major 401k producer. We don't do 401ks. We work with families and employees, and a lot of 401k producers try to do family work. They try to work with the participants, and some of them do, and they do a great job. Most of them don't. Most of them do a great job with the plan, but don't have the infrastructure or the manpower to also then work with the employees. So we can come in and we can work there where we're not looking to poach their plan. And so these are just some examples, but I have a list of strategic alliances. I am active with those kinds of things. And I'm looking for other financial advisors we can partner with and work with because there's so much abundance. There's so much opportunity. And working together, it is so much better to see each other as collaborators rather than competitors that I just think there's a huge opportunity for the right folks. So I mentioned the centers of influence and strategic alliances. The next is the traditional media. And it's not just the books and the publishing, it's also the podcast. And I did 5 years of the Don't Retire Graduate podcast, and we took some time off for the book. And now the show's coming back January 1st of 25. So we're very excited. We're scheduling interviews again. And every Thursday, there'll be a new episode. And that has been great for business development and for brand awareness. And it's also a ton of fun. I mean, you do it. This is a ton of fun to meet new people and have and get a chance to podcast. So that's the third. And then fourth is financial wellness, which so many firms say they do, particularly big firms. But what they're really doing is they're really saying, hey, we have an app for that. We actually put boots on the ground. We do education for employees. Employers will hire us to not only do employee education, but then to do one-on-one consults with their employees on the employer time and employer nickel. And we have the opportunity to help them not only navigate their own financial journey, but also make sure they're using their benefits properly because people just don't understand them. So we do webinars, we do seminars, we do full day education events, whatever employers want. And if we do a 1 hour webinar, it's simple and inexpensive. We spend half an hour on the 10 steps to wealth building. It's very straightforward, very basic. And then we spend a half an hour on a deeper dive on their benefit plan. And then when we meet with people, Steve, we find half of them don't have beneficiaries on their 401k, or they didn't elect disability insurance because they didn't know what to do, or they're not using their HSA properly. And the list goes on and on, simple stuff. And we're not a threat to their benefit people, their HR department, their 401k provider, or anybody else, because we're not poaching that. We're working with these people. And what I tell folks is that money's a little bit like oxygen. When you have enough, you don't think about it. And when you don't have enough, it's hard to think about anything else. And if that's true, then your employees, while they're at work, if they're worried about making the next tuition payment or mortgage payment or car payment or how they're going to handle mom and dad, they're not thinking about work. So if we can provide an outlet for them to get some advice they might never have paid for and to do it as an added employee benefit, that becomes a home run.
I appreciate the great detail there. Very helpful. As you look at the amount of new business that comes in from those four channels, can you give me a rough sense for like how many leads do these generate or how many new clients in 2024, for example,
Sure.
that are going to come in through these four channels?
We will add this year about 100 families as clients to the firm. The vast majority will come from one of those four channels, the only fifth channel being client referrals, which of course we're always happy to have, and that they make a huge difference. I'm involved in other things to generate opportunities. We have a client advisory board that's incredibly helpful. We work with study groups with other advisors. That's incredibly helpful. We go to the industry conferences, which is helpful, but we'll add about 100 households a year.
Okay. I can be very numerical.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to ask you to take these four channels, let's call it, and
Yes.
can you rank those from 1 to 4 in terms of how they have been most effective in bringing in new business?
Absolutely. Number one is financial wellness because you're meeting with so many people that it creates this opportunity right off the bat. Because if you can get an employer to say yes and they have 400 employees, 100 of them are going to meet with you, 12 of them are going to say, I'd like to work with you beyond this engagement. And then we'll discount our normal onboarding and financial planning fee for them as an added employee benefit, and they're delighted. So that's clear. That's absolutely number one in terms of headcount. In terms of sort of what's second, I would say the second one would be strategic alliances. And again, it's because it's one to many. Working with a 401k producer or working with a firm that is also generating opportunities that they can't handle or don't want means that we're getting an avalanche from those folks. It's not a one-off like a referral might be. I would say centers of influence is probably third, but I would also, with the caveat that most of the new business that comes from centers of influence is the highest end client. So when you look at the revenue per client, the depth of the revenue in that relationship, if it's coming from an estate attorney, is generally going to be better than if it's coming from an entry-level employee in a financial wellness program. That's the caveat. And I would say that the media piece is fourth, and it's a distant fourth. Writing books does not make you money. It becomes an interesting calling card. It gets you speaking opportunities. It's created consulting business for me, but it hasn't created a huge number of households joining the firm. I don't think it hurts, but no one should write a book for the money. It does not make you money, ever.
Yeah. Yeah. I've written a couple, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, it is a money loser. It's fun. I love doing it, but you don't make money on it. You can do, I do a lot of public speaking and I love to do that. But normally the books are sent to an attorney after a one-on-one COI meeting, or they're sent to the employer to say, hey, if you'd like workbooks for your employees, we can do a bulk order for those. And the workbooks are great. People love being able to go through and build their own financial plan. The book is fun, but it's not John Grisham.
But I think your point is well taken there, in that you may not be selling a million copies of it, but it is a great tool as part of the overall marketing mix, the marketing strategy you just mentioned there. You send a copy to a center of influence, you put a personal note in there, and you
Correct.
say, hey, on page 82, we talk about such and such. I think this might be something that you and some of your clients might be interested in. If you have any questions about this, let's set up a call and we can talk about it. So
Correct.
little things like that can go a long way toward deepening a relationship and really highlighting your level of expertise.
I would totally agree with that. And I would also say that the short ebooks are much better for business development than a full published book. And the reason for that is that you can give them their own URL, you give them their own landing page, and people will remember it. If I rattled off our website address right now and someone's driving in the car, they will not remember it as they listen to the show. They're not writing it down. But if I said go to lowtaxbook.com and learn some strategies for paying less taxes, people will go to lowtaxbook.com, they'll look it up, and they'll download some free information, learn how 529s and HSAs and life insurance and Roth IRAs work and all that kind of stuff, and they'll remember it, and then they'll be on our communication list. They'll start getting a newsletter or something, and then that creates opportunity. But the book itself, that's really tough. And I did the audiobook, Steve. That is really tough. Sitting and reading a book is not the easiest thing in the world on camera.
It's funny you should say that about the URL, because I still have ringing in my head some ads that I kept hearing constantly some time ago. I think it was from Grant Cardone. Maybe it was him, maybe it was someone else, but it was tiredofmissingsales.com. And he must have said it a dozen times in each ad, tiredofmissingsales.com.
And you remembered it.
And I remember it.
And you would never have gone to his site otherwise. No one's
That's
coming
right.
to our website through a Google search is great. SEO is fine. It's not where to spend money, though. It's really not. You spend money on things like this, like being able to give out in a conversation, give out some free information. If you're doing a talk, give out free information on the consulting side or on the financial planning side. And if you've given something to people that they really want, that's free, they will not forget that you've given that to them. And it's not quid pro quo. Most people will look at it and maybe do nothing with it, and that's fine. But for the ones where it really resonates, you have an opportunity to meet somebody you would never otherwise meet.
I heard you say a little bit ago that you have no minimum at the firm. And I think you also said you have about 700 households. So
Yes.
what's like the AUM or the average household
Sure.
size? And then I want to talk a little bit more about this no minimum idea.
Sure. Right now we're at about 750 million under management. So the average household for us is about 1.1, 1.2 million. But that's misleading. That's the mean. The
Yeah.
median is much lower than that because we have 200 private wealth clients and 500 financial planning clients. And so there's a delineation there. The reason that we don't use a minimum asset base is that we were turning away folks that really, A, needed the advice and couldn't find it anywhere, and B, who are going to have events down the road where their relationship with us will change. There's going to be an inheritance or a business sale or a real estate sale or a change of job or something is going to come down the pike. Who do you think they're going to work with? They're going to work with the folks that already know them and have already done some work with them. And so we don't have a minimum on our financial planning for anybody under $300,000 with us. We charge them $250 a month to be a member of the firm, to have ongoing advice, to be able to email us or ping us with various things. For private wealth, it's 500 a month. And that's it. And for people with assets, obviously, if they get over various levels, we don't charge the monthly. We don't have to. The assets are paying the freight. And for larger clients, we are absolutely offering added value type services. We have segmentation plans, just like most firms either do or certainly should. You're much more high touch with the families that are at the higher end because they require that type of handholding. They want it, they expect it, and they're paying for it. So it's a reasonable thing.
You mentioned your degree is in English, mine's in
Yes.
finance. So I often talk about the numbers. So
Uh-huh.
when you look at the profitability
Hmm.
of your private wealth clients versus your financial planning clients, I guess, do you look at the profitability in some level of detail?
Yes.
And if so, as you look at the financial planning clients, where I think you said you're charging $250 a month, they may have less
Hmm.
than 300,000
Hmm.
in assets. And I've done this analysis with a lot of advisors over the years where they are losing
Hmm.
money on a significant percentage of their clients. And
Hmm.
obviously, it's being made up on the larger clients. And so there's always this question of, okay,
Yeah.
is it fair to the large clients that they're subsidizing the losses on the small clients? And is it fair to the small clients where they're basically, even though, quote, they're paying a service,
Yeah.
they're paying a
Yeah.
lot less. So how do you think about, but on the other hand, I want to serve everybody. I want
Well,
to help people.
your point's well taken. And I was in your camp until one of our partners, Yanni Niebuhr, spent some time and did a pro forma just based on the financial planning, this concept of financial planning for all and what it could become.
Mhm.
And so many firms were parting ways with clients below a certain minimum or simply not taking them on. And I was in that camp. I was thinking that's exactly what we need to do. That's the direction that the stream is going. And so we have become salmon swimming in a different direction upstream. The short answer is our financial planning for all is profitable. It's not nearly as profitable, but it is profitable, partly because it is one meeting a year and they're all remote, and partly because they're working with advisors at a much lower salary level than the salary level that the private wealth clients are working with. So when it comes to figuring out what it costs to service that book of business, it's actually very modest. No, it's not fair for larger clients to subsidize smaller ones. That is something that would make anybody unhappy. And I can say that's not happening here. I would say that the financial planning clients are, by and large, creating enough profitability that it's worth doing. And then the private wealth is that is what's giving shareholders ROI. So if the combination of the two, if all we had was the financial planning for all division, we'd be profitable, but not enough that someone would say, I've got to buy that stock. The combination, though, is really good. And we've had a lot of cases where financial planning clients suddenly move over and become private wealth clients because an ESOP comes due or a 401k rollover happens or mom passes away and suddenly it's $4 million. And because that's happened enough times, we don't even consider that in the profitability because they've already jumped ship. If we were to add that back into the folks that we onboarded as financial planning clients who are now seven-figure clients, the ROI would be a whole lot better.
Yeah, and your points are well taken. And along those lines, what I say to advisors is I'm not making any judgments here. My role is not to judge whether you
Hmm.
should work with no minimum or not. What
Hmm.
I want to do is just deal in reality and make
Hmm.
sure that we understand what the situation is. And then you can make a decision on where do you want to position yourself in the marketplace, meaning,
Hmm.
and I have advisors come to the conclusion that we're here to serve people. And if it means that 10% of our clients we're losing money on, we're okay with that. And we're going to
Hmm.
consider that sort of our pro bono type giving back to the community thing. And I'm like, that's terrific.
Hmm.
And I just want to make sure that you understand what that is so that you can make a conscious decision to do that as opposed to just thinking things are okay, but they may not necessarily be. And the other thing that you said that I think is so key is that you've structured your level of service to be somewhat commensurate with what their needs are and what they're paying. So you may be minimizing what you may be losing. Although I think in your case, you said they aren't actually are profitable. So I
Yeah.
think that's also important is that the service level is commensurate with as close as you can to what they're paying. And as long as you can do that, then as you've built there, it makes a lot more sense to be able to work with those folks. And to your point, some of them are going to turn into private wealth clients over time.
They are. And frankly, to have no minimum but not charge some kind of ongoing fee is a recipe for losing money.
Yeah.
That and that is it's unfortunate, but it's true. And those folks need to find something online where they're paying almost nothing because there's not a whole lot to do. But we're talking to people who actually do want a financial plan, are willing to pay for one, are willing to pay for it to be renewed. And then we're automating as many of the steps in that process as we're able without dehumanizing it and without making it feel institutional, because nobody wants that. And so there's still a relationship one-on-one. There's still a CFP working with you. You're not, it's not this is not the B team per se, but it is the younger advisors because they're going to grow with these clients. A lot of the financial planning clients are young families. They're going to grow together. They're going to work together for the next 40 years. They don't want me. I'm not going to be here in 40 years.
And
Bottom
and
line, it does
charging
work.
that, yeah, and charging that subscription fee, I think, is so key because obviously if someone has $100,000 and you're charging 1%, it's hard to make a profit on
You
that.
can't.
But if you
Yeah,
are
you can't.
charging the subscription fee, and I think the other thing that I also counsel advisors on is
Mm-hmm.
I say, look, I'm never going to suggest that you just cut clients because they no longer meet your minimum. They were
Mm-hmm.
there when you needed them. And it's
Yeah.
just, it's not appropriate for you just to cut them because you're not making any money on them anymore. What you can do, though, is you can honestly go to them and say, we do need to charge a minimum fee to
Mm-hmm.
provide the support and just talk about all the things that you've done over time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then clients may self-select
Oh
in
yeah.
that situation. And I think that's okay, so you're giving them an option. So I think there's ways to do that are fair and ethical based on, them being there when you actually needed them in the early days.
And the fee that we are charging monthly is not perpetual. It's not forever. It's not flat for the rest of time. As expenses go up, as the cost of living goes up, as the cost of managing a firm goes up, we may have to adjust that over time. I try not to do any kind of increases multiple years in a row. I think it's really important to message at least every other year that fees aren't changing. I think that, and I actually learned that from the NFL team in town here, because when the Ravens came to town, they said, we're only raising ticket prices every other year. So that half the time you felt like you'd gotten slugged and half the time you felt like it was great, even if it wound up being the exact same place. And I thought that was a really smart way to do it because half the time people are psyched. So that's why we did it that way.
It's perception.
It is. And some of that's marketing, some of it's messaging,
Mhm.
but it's also nice to be able to message that.
Yeah. Let's talk about scaling the business. And I
Mhm.
almost hate to use the word scale because I think it sounds like negative for the client. Like, how can I make more money and do less work kind of thing? But as you continue to think about how do you grow the firm,
Mhm.
how do you think about technology? What role is technology playing? How can you grow a personal services business in a way that continues to provide the same or better level of service at hopefully increasing rates of profitability?
I think it starts with having the right tech stack. I think a lot of independent firms have tech stacks that their independent broker dealer or somebody throws out there and they're not great. And so there's a lot of manual work. We use Salesforce Financial Cloud, which is totally amazing. We use Orion, and the two of them integrate completely. While all of the communication with our clients is personal, all of the to-dos and tasks and the notes and the things that need to happen are happening behind the scenes, and they're happening in an automated way so we don't forget things. We don't make mistakes nearly as often. We're not perfect, but we don't make mistakes nearly as often that way. And I think what's coming down the pike, AI is certainly going to change the way we handle certain operational things at some point. I'm not usually an early adopter with new technologies. I usually find that being patient and waiting a little while can protect you from being a guinea pig for something that may be not working yet. But there will be the transcription of notes. I know that this podcast is being transcribed right now by AI. That's great. That doesn't bother me as a guest. And as a host, that's awfully smart. You don't have someone in the background scribbling notes. You don't have to watch it 6 times to get the poignant notes that you want. AI can absolutely help with note taking. It can help with compliance. It can help with a variety of things without changing the one-on-one relationship. AI is not rendering advice. It can't. It can try, but it can't because it can't know what it feels like to go through some of the things you're going through. It can't know what it's like to feel like you might lose your job. It can't know what it's like to have a mom with cancer. It can't know what it's like to have a special needs child. And if they ever tell you a computer can learn to feel that stuff, that's I'm sure it will learn to do that. That's creepy because it can't. It's a human experience. So I don't think we're taking away from the one-on-one and the human interaction at all. I would not want to do that because I frankly don't like having technology replace humans. We don't have for example, no one calling our office is going into a prompt system to press one for this or dos for Espanol. It's not happening. They're getting a human to answer the phone. I think it matters. I think it is nice to know the people here. It's nice for us to do some things that are incredibly human, whether it's one to one or one to many. But technology, having the right tech stack does make the practice more scalable because for example, we can automate scheduling. It used to be you had to call every client and go back and forth. Oh, let me check with my spouse and see if they can do that Wednesday. Or you send an email, here's a date. And by the time they get back to you, that date's full and you're back and forth and back and forth and back. And now Schedule Once can handle that and people can pick the time they want and it goes in your calendar and it runs the workflow and we know exactly who needs to do what to be ready. So technology is already playing a huge role in efficiency, which lends itself to scale.
You mentioned Salesforce, Orion, Schedule Once,
Mhm.
financial planning. What are you doing for financial planning?
Ours is all our own. Ours is all Excel based.
Mhm.
It's all our own. It automates taking a model that will build out hypotheticals for accumulation, for income, for all the various types of steps where we can in real time with a client say, what if there's this change? What if we added this amount per month instead of that month? Or what if inflation did this? Or what if we worked an extra 2 years? And you can model it out instantly without having to go through a 100-page report, which is pretty cool. I've been told that the software we've created, we could probably package and sell, but I'm not sure I want to do that. Right now, it's our secret sauce.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've talked to a handful of firms over the years that have their own internal Excel spreadsheet based financial planning software. Even multi-billion dollar
Yeah.
firms have their own in-house planning Excel spreadsheet. So I find that interesting.
Yeah, it's uniquely ours. And when attorneys or accountants or other people see the model, they know exactly where it's come from. They know it's ours. And so locally, that's created a weird advantage too, because people are, oh, we've seen this before. We know you're in good shape.
Yeah.
Because 12 other advisors aren't spitting out the same e-money report. We've tried those things. And it used to be we used e-money for a client vault, but then you had NFS had their own login for statements and Orion had it for performance and you have all these different logins. And if there was any complaint that we got from our advisory board, it was always, why do we have three different logins? So now Orion does it all. It's our vault, it's our performance management, and it aggregates statements and confirms and all the things people need. And it's one login and clients love it. So that saved us a lot of time. Think how many times people were forgetting their password because they had three different logins and three different passwords.
And then on the tax side, do you have any software that you use for tax planning?
We use Plan for the tax planning piece. And I'm a premier member of RTS. So for Steve Jarvis and their group, there's a lot of tax planning resources there with their team, including and up to tax preparation if we need it. We don't do that in house. But I would say that our tax liaison and also our estate planning liaison are very good.
Yeah, the tax prep, you said you don't do that in-house. And that's
Hmm.
also a conversation I have frequently with advisors about,
Hmm.
should I do tax prep? Should I not do tax prep? I do tax planning.
Yep.
And so how do you think about doing tax prep in-house versus not doing that? And how do you connect that since you're not doing it in-house? How
Yeah.
do you connect the tax planning that you do with the person's tax preparer?
A great question. And we, like many firms, were kicking around the idea of hiring a CPA, doing some things internally. We took that to our advisory board and unanimously they said, don't do it. They said, one of the benefits to working with you and having our own CPA is two sets of eyeballs, two different perspectives, and the ability to communicate in that way rather than us checking the same box using the same strategy. They liked the checks and balances between the financial and the tax side. Much the same, I'm not hiring a lawyer to write wills and trusts. We're going to handle beneficiaries and asset titling and all those kinds of things. But to have that second set of eyes creates that dream team a little bit. Our client said, please do not do tax prep. We would much rather work with folks. And the Center of Influence project by knowing all of our clients' CPAs and being proactive by saying, hey, send us these returns. We're going to run a report. We'll send it back to you. We're looking at whether it's whether it's Roth conversions or whether it's IRMA planning or whether it's Social Security timing or any of those kinds of things, or capital gains or losses or how we're handling charitable contributions. We have the ability to run it by our clients' CPAs. Now, I will say of the 700 or so families, 500 have CPAs and 200 don't. The folks who are self-preparing at using TurboTax or the ones who are just going to H&R Block or Jackson Hewitt or one of the tax preps, I think they're shortchanging themselves. I think they're making a mistake. Not because it can't be done yourself, but because there is a benefit, I think, to objective, solid tax advice throughout the year, not just somebody to fill out a form once a year.
So, two observations on what you just said there.
Uh-huh.
One is that you mentioned that it's unanimous among your client base that they want a separation
Yes.
between the tax prep and the tax planning.
Yes.
I don't think that's a hard and fast rule around the country, because I
No, it's not.
definitely have worked with a lot of advisors where the clients say, I really like the fact that we do all of this and everything's coordinated. It makes it seamless. It seems much easier for them to just have to deal with one place. I think people are a little different. In
Yeah.
your case, your clientele, they like the fact that it's separate. But I think your other point is probably not highlighted enough, which I think is really important, in that if you don't do the tax prep in-house, there's that great opportunity to develop relationships with all
Yes.
these other tax preparers and planners out there
Yes.
that your clients are using. So I think there's a benefit there that may not necessarily be talked about enough. And I think that in your case, obviously, is a key benefit and a source of new business for you.
It is. And someday we may wind up with a strategic alliance with a CPA firm locally or nationally or what have you. I'm not ruling it out because I understand the desire to bring some of that complexity under not one roof necessarily, but onto one team. I think, though, if we were to do that, we probably have hundreds of clients who really like their CPAs and aren't going to want to switch just because it's here. So I don't know that it would become a convenience for a small percentage of folks, but I don't think it's going to radically shift where they do their taxes. And I could be wrong, but when we went to the board and we said, this is what we're thinking of doing, we're thinking about bringing a CPA in-house and doing this in-house, they literally all said, don't. And I was surprised by it, actually, because I thought it would be a convenience, but it was seen as a deterrent in a very strange way. And part of it is because we have so many relationships with CPAs, to your point, we'd be biting the hands that feed us.
Let's talk about the client experience.
Mhm.
And that's something that we talk a lot about in the industry these days. And I'd like to start with, what is your definition of the client experience?
The client experience for BFG, for us, has to be a completely unique set of deliverables and a relationship that goes beyond just the things that get a financial advisor paid. In other words, the client experience, they have to be able to call us and say, should I buy or lease my next car? Or I'm thinking about an allowance for my kid. What do you think? Things that might seem really innocuous. We want that dialogue to be very robust and very constant. We want our team to feel like we can be on call and that folks can reach us. We also want to make sure that they're getting a human to answer the phone, that they've got a team of people who can help them, that they're not waiting for, if it's me, for example, they're not waiting for 3 days for me to get back from Arizona or something. They're getting this right away from a team of folks. So the client experience has to be very hands-on, very responsive, and we have to be prepared to say there's something we don't know. There's plenty we don't know. I think clients expect us to have the answers for a lot of things, but no one expects us to have the answers for everything. And for us to say, you know what, that's an excellent question. I'm not sure. Let's check with your CPA or your attorney, or let me do some research and get back to you. And then to get back to them is better than making something up or taking a guess. And so I think there's so many different aspects of financial planning that don't generate revenue directly, and I want our client experience to be agnostic to that. I want to be looking at a good faith estimate on a mortgage refinance. I want to be looking at the drafts of legal documents or even the drafts of tax returns. Sometimes we have clients who send us a draft and say, does it look like everything's good? Is there anything missing that you can see? And while we're not practicing law and we're not practicing tax, we will certainly give it a second set of eyeballs. And I think that's part of the client experience. Our client experience has changed a little bit over the years as we've gotten broader, because we used to be a pretty local/regional firm, and now we have clients all over the country, which means a lot of our experience has transitioned to Zoom. Some people love it. Some people don't love it as much. And so we're still, for areas where we have a large clientele, we're still doing road shows. We're still spending time in Texas and in Ohio and in other states where we can be in front of a lot of people, in Florida, certainly. I think there's a benefit to that. We're still running events and education and things that give clients extras. And I think that's important. I will say that the most important piece of the client experience, I think, is always getting human assistance and always getting it quickly. It doesn't mean that we'll have every answer on the tip of our tongue. It means we're going to get it and we're going to get it right.
How consistent is the delivery of the client experience throughout the firm? For example, some advisors will have a comprehensive financial planning checklist,
Mm-hmm.
50 items, 150 items that they make sure that they go through. Now, obviously, not everything on that list is going to be applicable to every client, but at least they're going to address it over some period of time. So, do you follow some kind of checklist financial planning process to make sure you don't miss anything, or how consistent is that delivery?
I think the delivery is incredibly consistent. I think the nuance is in the personality of the advisor. We all have different personalities. We're all going to share different anecdotes or different experiences, which is fine. But in terms of making sure that the functional things are being done, we have a team of people who build all of the various agendas, review all the various reports, make sure that we're ready to deliver what we need to deliver. All of our clients have the same models. All of them have the same hypotheticals. All of them have the same. We eat our own cooking in terms of our investment management. I own what clients do. And so we have models here that we manage in house. And our clients who are in a similar situation to me will have a portfolio that looks a whole lot like mine. Never eat in a restaurant where the chef won't eat. And so I think the experience is pretty similar. I also think that one of the things that makes this good is that we do advanced planning meetings every Thursday. All of our CFPs sit in a room and we go over all of the various private wealth cases that are coming up in the next 2, 3 weeks. And we talk about them together so that they're getting lots of different perspectives of, hey, did you think of this? Or what about this NUA planning? Or how does this buy sell agreement affect their business plan? Or any of those various things. We're getting lots of different input on the private wealth piece. And on the financial planning piece, I'm sitting down with the team who is delivering those meetings every Monday, and I'm spending time with them to talk about, hey, make sure that we explore this, or did you consider that, or have you met with their daughter who's the responsible party for them, and let's make sure there's some communication. So quality control is something I take very seriously, and I think we're doing a pretty good job. And if we're not, I would always be open to somebody calling me and saying, hey, there's been a blip. I want to know about it.
As it relates to the non-financial aspect of the
Mm-hmm.
client experience, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's client events, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
taking clients out for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, more on the
Mm-hmm.
social side, do you do much of that? And if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, we do some. It's hard because we're so geographically dispersed. We do our advisory board meetings and we communicate that to clients. We do what we call meet and mingles, which are just happy hours. In fact, we have one tonight. And so we'll do 4 or 5 a year in different areas where we have large client profiles. And so we'll take our entire team to those kinds of things. When we go, for example, to see clients in Florida, I'll take 3 or 4 people with me and we'll go, and that way they'll get to know some of our firm because some people have never set foot in our office. So we try to make sure that there's a lot of personalization, a lot of outreach, and every one of our clients has a client relations person who's essentially their concierge. They have one human they can call, and two of them have been with us now for many years, and I would put up against anybody's client relations team anywhere, and they are the one go-to. So if you're not sure who to call or what you need, you call this human and they will take care of you. And having that concierge, and that's at both the financial planning and the private wealth level. If you're not sure who to call, this human, and we'll get you what you need. And so I think from an event standpoint, the meet and mingles are great. They are bring a friend kind of thing. We've certainly done ball games, and we used to have a suite at the Orioles games, and people used to love coming, and now they don't. So we stopped. Sometimes things come and go a little bit.
What's been the hardest part building this business over the years?
It's a great question. And the hardest part is recognizing that I can't do it all. And this sense that when I was a startup, I did everything and I had to trust the experts and let people get better at things than me. And that means giving up a lot of the hands-on stuff that I was used to. And it's been a blessing, but it was challenging to trust other people to do it differently than I would do it, but just as good. I'm not trying to create an army of mini-me's. I do a lot of mentoring and coaching, but Our younger advisors they need to know what they're doing, and they do. They're very talented, but they also have to know how to massage certain situations or how to engage in certain conversations. And there are things there are days still where I say, man, if I had done this myself, it would have been X, Y, and Z. And then I have to slap myself and say, that's not reality. That's not how it works. And we have great people. We get a lot of positive feedback about our team. We hire really well. We engage our clients and our staff a lot. And mostly the things we get complimented on the most are our people. And so that means we're hiring well. It means we're training well, but it means I'm staying out of it. And for me, I'm much more external than internal these days. And the place will run without me. If I tripped and fell into traffic today, the office wouldn't miss a beat. They'd miss my charming personality, but they would not miss a beat. They would repurpose my office immediately, of course. And at the end of the day, I think I've made myself irrelevant, which is incredibly important as a business owner in any industry and also really hard.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the signs of a great leader is if you can make yourself irrelevant over time. And I think I've done that a couple times in my career. And on the one hand, it can be a little scared. It's like, oh, I guess you don't need me anymore. I've put a great team in place and things are humming along. But what would you say is like the hardest thing for you to give up over time?
These are tough questions, Steve. You didn't tell me if we stayed in for overtime, it was going to get more difficult. The toughest thing for me to give up, frankly, is some of the relationships because I adore the people we've been working with for years. And I don't ever want someone to feel let down because I'm not in that room. And it's not that they're not going to get a great experience. It's that it's a little like losing a friend, and I don't want to feel that way, and I definitely don't want them to feel that way. And so I think the hardest thing to do is to say, man, I remember these folks from 1997, and that institutional memory is more than that. It's a friendship that develops over many years, and so maintaining a relationship with folks is hard. I'll also say as we grow and we hire people, I can't know them all as well as I used to. It used to be simple to have everybody to lunch or to invite everybody to my home or something. And now it's hard to get everybody in the same room. There's a lot of people. And they say that the sign of a big firm is you have clients you don't know. And the sign of a really big firm is you have employees you don't know. I don't have employees I don't know, but I definitely have employees I don't know very well. And I'm not always involved in the hiring. And that is an interesting thing. I used to be involved in nothing happened unless I was aware of it for many years. And it's impossible. It's untenable and it's not healthy for me or for the company. But the hardest thing to give up is, I think, the personal relationships with not only some clients, but also some employees, the people you spent Saturdays with because you couldn't get it all done during the week and everybody came in and you sprung for pizza. That stuff sticks with you. And that doesn't happen anymore. We have all the technology and all the people and all the systems. And it used to be us making it up as we went. And I remember the day we moved into our first office and I had borrowed money from everywhere. And I remember Lisa, who was the first person I ever hired and who is a dear friend to this day, though she doesn't work here anymore, but she's a dear friend. And I remember the two of us sitting on the floor because there was no furniture, waiting for it to be delivered. And I'm thinking to myself, what have I done? And we went through this together. And it's a bond that 20 plus years later, we still have, and we still laugh about, and we still go, oh my gosh, like we left another firm together and it was our Jerry Maguire moment. It was the grab the goldfish, Will of Dental, right? And let's just do this. And those memories are priceless. And most of the people here, some of them weren't born, but none of them were here. And so you lose some of that personal memory piece.
Yeah, at the end of the day, that all comes back to those relationships.
It does. It really does.
Eric, as we wrap up here, is there any final thought, comment, observation that you'd like to share that we haven't touched on yet?
The only thing I'll say is that you and I have talked about a lot. We've covered a lot of ground today. And one thing that I know that I suspect you also know is there isn't one way to do everything. And that for your advisors who are listening to this, there are lots of different ways to accomplish all of these various things. And it's about finding the resource, the system, the people, the technology, the consultant, the folks who really make that come to life and who speak the language that you speak. And I think there's lots of different ways to do things really well. And as long as we're doing them well, the only thing I would urge your listeners to do is to start looking at each other as collaborators rather than competition. I don't know of anything that would be more impactful than if the really good financial advisors, because there's a shortage of good financial advisors. If the really good ones work together rather than feeling like they were, sharks on chum, that would be a win. And I think we're doing a pretty good job as an industry now. I really do.
Excellent. All right, Eric, if folks want to connect with you in some way, what's the best way for them to stay in touch with what you're doing?
I already told you if I give you my website, no one will write it down, but it's bfgfa.com. You can also go to brotmanmedia.com, pick up a copy of Don't Retire, Graduate. If you loved it, put it on Amazon, tell everybody. If you didn't love it, please don't tell anyone. You can let me know. But I would love to stay in touch with some of the folks who are here, and there's a whole lot of information at brotmanmedia.com.
Excellent. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Steve. It's been a pleasure.